wrong. Hello, and welcome to the podcast Smart Money Simplified with your host, Brent Mekosh. Brent, how are you?
Good. And I'm really excited about today's conversation. You know, a lot of the people that we work with in a lot of areas of their life are very high performers, the entrepreneurs, they're high level leaders within their businesses. And believe that, let's start over. I don't like that. I rarely do that, Andy. I don't like that start. Let's try that again.
You're good.
All right.
That's
Well,
like that's like me all the
I'm
time when I do all my recordings. I'm like, okay,
I'm
let's do
demonstrating. I'm
it.
demonstrating what I'm just demonstrating the
Good.
editing features that
Thank you
we
for
have
doing
here.
that for me.
Brent had actually sent me a note, said you're a little nervous about this stuff and that he was going to fuck up on purpose just to make
He
you
did.
relaxed. Yeah.
He did. Yeah, this is great.
That's I'll start all over again.
Right.
I'll give you a new intro. Okay. Here we go. And three, two, one. Hello, and welcome to the Smart Money Simplified podcast with your host, Brent Mekosh. Hi, Brent. How are you?
I'm doing great, Bill. How you doing today?
I'm great. I'm great. I'm looking forward to this conversation, as a matter of fact.
I Yeah, I think this is going to be a really important one, and it's one that I've got a little bit of personal stake in terms of hearing what Andy has to say. Because, as you know, and as listeners to our podcast know, a lot of changes in our own business here at the Well Stewards in the past year or
Mm-hmm.
so. And one of the biggest benefits that I have gotten out of this partnership with Jeff now is that you're not alone running this business. And I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs feel that way. And prior to the Well Stewards, when I was running my own team, I had really fantastic support. Those that work with me know how great the people that work for me really are. But I didn't really feel like I had a counterpart or anybody within the team that I could share some of these challenges with. And I think that any leader, whether you're leading a team, whether you're leading a company, even you're leading your house, there can be a sense of isolation from high performers in terms of just dealing with the day-to-day stuff. They feel like they got to put everything on their shoulders, and that can be a heck of a burden sometimes. And that's truly one of the things I'm grateful for about the partnership that I have with Jeff now is that's been largely mitigated because you've got somebody that you can come to with these things. But not everybody may have that escape valve, and so I've got a really great guest on today. His name is Andy Maurer, and he is an expert in working with leaders and some of the struggles that they face and some of the isolation that they feel in their roles. So, Andy, did I kind of give a good introduction to the kind of work that you do?
Yeah, it was fantastic, and I can give more background today on my
Yeah,
story
please
and
do.
what got me into this. But yeah, great intro. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad to have you here. And why don't you share a bit of a background with us and how you got into the business that you're in right now?
Absolutely. So I started out actually in the personal training industry. So I got my degree in exercise and wellness, was a trainer for 10 years working with leaders and companies around training their employees and their leadership teams to be more fit. I'd run them through a fitness program. I'd work on corporate wellness. I loved that area and that industry. Back then, when I was doing that, though, it wasn't as holistically focused around wellness as it is today. Everything's about wellness now, but back then it was a lot more focused on purely aesthetics and the way that you look on the outside. And I just think health is a lot broader than that. I think it's a lot more comprehensive. It's internal, it's external, it's mental, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's relational. So I actually went back to school, got my master's degree, became a licensed therapist, became a licensed trauma therapist, actually, because I wanted to do deeper work with people on the emotional and relational side of the spectrum. And I love that work. That's work that I had done in my own personal life with a therapist for years, 10 years off and on of deep work that I did on myself around identity, around my own trauma, around my own story in order to heal so that I could be better for my wife, my kids, my leaders, and just feel better in general. So I knew kind of the trajectory of that route. And when I went back and I became a trauma therapist, I was working with all different kinds of clientele. I was working with kids. I was working with sexual assault victims. I was working with domestic violence. I was working with men and women and couples and all these different things. And I started to gravitate towards working with a lot of leaders, politicians, nonprofit leaders, pastors, business leaders, professional athletes, everyone kind of at the top of their game. And I saw similarities in each of their kind of psychic makeup and struggles that they were having. And a lot of those leaders, when they needed help on kind of the vision for life side of things, they'd go see an executive coach. If they needed help on the emotional, relational, they'd come see me as a therapist. But those worlds felt really disparate. They felt really at odds and very clunky for them. They were looking for something that flowed a little bit more to this consistency of life, of the highs, the lows, the vision, and then the emotional and relational side of things. So I thought, man, what if we take the best of what we do in therapy and the best of what leadership coaching is about and bring those two together? And that's really what birthed Pursue Whole back in 2020. Me and my wife started and co-founded Pursue Whole, which is this brand built to help leaders and those they love pursue wholeness in their life, leadership, and relationships. And today I can break down this concept of wholeness because I think it's a really important concept that's getting talked about more. But a lot of people don't know what that is. And I wanted to bridge both the executive coaching leadership side, help my leaders cast a vision on who they want to be, where they're headed, and also deal with some of the emotional and relational issues going on in their marriage and their own personal life and their insecurities and their depression and their anxiety, which is common for every leader. So that's been a really fun, wild ride. I've had a lot of great success with my leaders in that place of really being kind of the best in both of those zones. And it's been very helpful and effective for a lot of my leaders.
I want to dive into this idea of putting different experiences in silos. Because I have two men in my life that have been incredibly significant to me. One is my father. One was a business mentor, and my dad. And this has helped me in life. And you can tell me where this could potentially be wrong. But he said, he said when I would walk into work every day, I'm on stage on that stage, and that's the role in there performing. And I leave any problems that I might have at home, they stay at home. When I come home, I leave my work problems at work. And there was a very clear differentiation with him in terms of those two roles in his life. Business mentor that I had through my 20s, he said to me something very similar. And these are now men. My dad's about to turn 86,
Yeah.
and business mentors in his 70s. He said, he said, I put my past in a box, I lock it up with a key, and I leave it there because I'm only looking forward. And I think that's kind of the older way, and it was the right way or wrong way. I don't know. I think some of those lessons have certainly helped me, but of looking at different areas of your life and differentiating what those roles and responsibilities are. Is that still valid, or is that something that should be broken down a bit?
Well, I think it's the way that people and leaders specifically try to operate in their life. The pressure and the stress becomes too high, the demands are too great. Too many people rely on these men and women. So, for them to be able to feel and deal with things like anxiety or loneliness or fear or discouragement or pain, there's not really time and a moment in their head of one, why would they deal with that? How's that going to help them in their performance and what they need to accomplish? And then two, where's the time to deal with that? So what they often do is they often push down and push away those feelings. Now that's problematic because you got a lot of very depressed, kind of flat, colorless life leaders who everybody would look at and say, "Oh my gosh, they have money, they have success, they have fame. Everybody knows who they are. They have social status, they have social relationships." Well, when you dig into a lot of these leaders' lives, you start to realize it's not so bright and colorful on the inside. Their life is often very flat. They don't have a lot of deep connections and friendships. And what they've done there is they've done this thing called depression. Well, we use that clinically, but if you break down the word depression, all it means is to push down and depress. It's like taking those cars in the junkyard and smushing them down into a little cube. You're depressing your feelings, you're pushing them down and pushing them away. Well, that becomes very problematic because if you want to do that to things like fear and loneliness and anger and loss, you depress those feelings. Guess what? You also depress. You depress joy and passion and connection and creativity. So life gets real flat. You don't have to feel the low lows, but you don't get access to the high highs. So a lot of these leaders, they have everything that everyone would ever want. And yet somehow they feel flat. They feel lost. They don't know what they feel. They don't know where they're headed. They don't know their purpose. They don't have deep, meaningful connection. And it's a very difficult place for them to be because the world looks at these leaders and goes, "Oh my gosh, their life looks amazing." They see the one dimensional image. And a lot of these leaders can't open up and won't open up and say, "Actually, I feel pretty lonely. Actually, I'm pretty insecure. Actually, I don't really know where the hell I'm headed." That would be detrimental to all of these people that they carry on their shoulders and lead. So it's kind of the way that leaders just do it, and they don't know that there's another way to feel a life of passion and purpose and joy and meaning and actually deal with your difficult emotions in a really healthy, vulnerable, and connected way. They don't have a lot of people teaching them how to do that. So they do what they know and what they've been taught from parents, which is to push down and push away. But then they lose so much of who they are as a person. They become very disconnected. They're high performers driving the car kind of 99% of the time. It's responsible, it's linear, it's logical, it gets stuff done. But then you have this other part of them that's kind of locked in the trunk, which is about connection and emotion and feeling and purpose and passion and meaning. And that part never gets to drive the car. And those two parts are so fragmented. And my job in coaching is to really bring back that wholeness of the whole person, of helping them connect with really their whole self and recognizing that their whole self has value to bring to the world around them. That's the best leaders.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that integration and why that can be powerful. But before we get into that, have you noticed as a trauma counselor, have you noticed patterns? Is there similar types of
Mm,
trauma that rhyme with leaders in the future? Because I do think,
yeah,
there's
it's a great
like awful
question.
things can happen, but you can leverage that pain into something great. And is it a consistent type of trauma that great leaders have experienced in their youth
Yeah,
or in
I
their lives?
being a trauma therapist, lots of people like to say, I had a very good childhood, nothing bad happened. Well, nothing bad might have happened. You might have not had sexual assault or physical violence happen to you, but a lot of leaders, nothing really great happened either. Okay. So they look at this and they're like, oh, nothing horrible happened to me. And it's like, well, did your parents ask you about what you felt? Did they create space for you to feel what you needed to feel? And like some of these questions, and they're like, no. And it's like, okay, you know what you're talking about right there is a term called emotional neglect. That is an asset facet of trauma, is to be the lack of emotional attunement that exists between a parent and a child. When that's not there, that has massive rippling effects of trauma in someone's life on how they connect with others, how they connect with themselves, and how they deal. So that's very problematic because research has shown that emotional neglect is just as damaging, if not more damaging, as things like sexual assault, sexual abuse, and domestic violence. So a lot of these leaders are like, oh, life is fine. Like no one cared about my emotions. No one taught me about my emotions, but nothing bad happened to me. It's like, that's probably the worst thing that could have happened to you. Because now as an adult, you're walking around almost with a 5-year old kind of developmental mentality on what is emotion. I can't name it. I can't feel it. I can't communicate it. Those are fundamental human things in both leadership and healthy relationships. So when we struggle to do that, I think that, Brent, is like a massive theme that I see is a lot of emotionally neglected men and women who don't know how to deal with what they feel and they don't know how to have deep relationships. Now, that's very problematic because a lot of these leaders will often say, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten in front of leadership groups, and a lot of the leaders come up and they're like, I just don't feel very much. I'm not a very feeling person. And it's like, well, let me shoot it straight with you. Every person is a feeling human being. You just learned that there's no point in feeling your emotions. So you've told yourself you're not emotional. What if you're actually very emotional? You just don't know how to access it and deal with it. So a lot of these leaders have just told themselves, I'm just not emotional. That is absolutely false from what I see from these leaders. They have this deep well of emotion. They love people, they connect with people. Connection is very important to them, but they tell themselves a story that they're not emotional, and therefore they never explore emotion that's inside of them. Instead of saying, I think I am really emotional, I just don't have places to talk about it, nor did I ever have someone teach me about how to access it. So as far as trauma goes, there's all the other types of trauma, but emotional immaturity, I think leaders see it in their teams see it in their leaders. When there's a lack of emotional maturity, oh my gosh, that causes so many problems within organizations. So many problems.
What does that look like when you say paint a picture of what a leader or a team with a lack of emotional maturity looks like? How does it operate?
A lack of personal self-care for yourself as a person. So you have a lot of leaders who are very good at noticing the needs of others, caring for the needs of others, pouring into the needs of others. Then you ask them, do you do that to yourself? And they're like, no, I don't take time to feel what I feel. I don't take time to take care of myself. And then that has massive ramifications on the home life, on kids, on spouses, on other things going on. They might look like they're this amazing leader with their teams. Oh, you're so giving, you're so caring. But they're burned out, they're exhausted, their mental health, they're coping through substances, all the things that you don't see. So that starts to break down on the work front because the home life is a mess. And then with a lot of other leaders, you have things like this inability to tap into compassion and curiosity, who are hard charging bulldozers that just get a lot of crap done. That damages a lot of the psychological safety in organizations. Or you have someone who's too psychologically safe, where they can't have difficult, confrontational, challenging conversations. And that breeds a whole nother set of frustration for people who don't know how to face conflict and deal with honest conversations. That's very frustrating, in the same way that people who don't know how to have compassion and curiosity just bulldoze in conversations. So those are kind of two spectrums when you have emotional immaturity that people tend to bend towards. You should be able to flow between compassion and candor during your day with who you're sitting down with.
If you have that lack of emotional maturity, or maybe that inability to access your own emotions, because I almost think of, really passionate people tend to be successful at whatever it is they're doing. And
Yeah.
that passion to me is an emotion. So where does that, and maybe I'm using the wrong word there, but where's that drive or emotion come from if someone has an inability to access that within themselves?
Yeah. Well, I think the best way to access passion is honestly from our pain. And let me break that down for a second, because I know that sounds odd for a lot of people. The best leaders that I've seen who live a purposeful and meaningful life have addressed their pain in their past. That has become their passion in life, and that passion has become their purpose. Our pain becomes our passion becomes our purpose. Because when you can look back and deal with your pain, whether it's insecurity, whether it's fear, whether it's broken relationships, whether it's not feeling good enough, and you can work through that, your life, your central core of passion and peace and joy and play start to open up, and you do things in life out of a sense of freedom and passion and joy. If you don't heal that, it might look like passion, but that passion is coming from people pleasing, fear of failure, insecurity, and you'll see the symptoms of that in their life, on burnout, on relational tension. So you can be you can be passionate about something from a very different starting place. You can be passionate about it because you have to win, because if you don't win, you don't know who you are, you don't have value and worth, and you're going to let people down. Now that's a very strong motivator in the short term. It doesn't last very long. Or you can come from a place of passion because it comes from a place of peace and joy and healing and purpose and connection. And you can show up to work with this invigorated energy. They're hard to explain, but they're different. It's almost like the starting place determines the type of passion that is represented. And it can look the same from the outside, but leaders know when they're operating from a place of passion that flows naturally from who they are, versus passion that is almost put on like a coat, where you're having to force it out. You're having to pull it out. It feels exhausting. It feels overwhelming. And I just think leaders deserve to have passion from a place of freedom and play and peace. And that,
Yeah.
go
Sorry,
ahead.
continue. And I guess another question I have for you is, if you are going to draw that out, um, everyone is afraid of being, ostracized. Everyone's afraid of looking different, of feeling like they're an imposter. How do
Yeah.
you draw that out of people in a way that is going to open them up? Because they're coming to you for a reason. So there's obviously a
Yeah.
reason that they've called you, but there's got to be major defenses and walls that you need to break down. What are some of the tools that you use to do that?
I think I create a safe enough space where leaders recognize that I don't need anything from them. Okay. That's really important, because every single person in their life, they need their money, they need their time, they need their energy from that leader. And that leader is typically a rock and an anchor for them. So I play the rock and anchor for my clients. I create emotional safety, um, Nothing shocks me that people tell me. So I've been a trauma therapist for a long time. Like nobody can say anything that's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was there. So that creates a sense of safety for people to say what they need to say, feel what they need to feel. But honestly, Brent, I think the biggest thing that I create for people is just I help them cast vision on who they want to be and where they're headed. And as I help them envision this more beautiful life of who they want to be as a leader, what they want in their marriage, what they want to feel on the inside, that's an easy entry point then into saying, okay, what are the roadblocks? What are the emotional hurdles? What are the pain points inside of you that are getting in the way of you accessing this beautiful vision of who you want to be? So I start with vision and then I go to the problems because that's a little different than how therapy works because you jump into therapy
Yeah,
and it's like
you do
problem,
the
problem,
problem
problem,
first.
problem, problem. And I start with vision. I start with who do you want to be? Where do you want to head? Let's talk about that. And then that will point us to, oh, okay, we really need to work through this area of insecurity or I'm not good enough feeling because that's really getting in the way of this vision you have for yourself. And they typically buy into that because it's tied to them accomplishing this vision of being better and doing better. And if I could just for a second talk about the concept of wholeness, because I think it is really what a lot of leaders are looking for. I've asked a lot of leaders in the last month specifically who come in, and I'll just ask them, what are you looking for in life? Like, what are you really trying to achieve? And what do you want in this life? A lot of them are like, gosh, I don't know. I mean, money, success, freedom, adventure, whatever it is. And you start to realize what they're really looking for and working so hard to acquire is this feeling of wholeness. It's similar to wellness. It actually fits within the wellness industry, but it's a little different. It's this term called wholeness. And wholeness actually, if you look up the word health, wellness, the etymology of those words actually goes back to this word wholeness. It was first used way back in ancient Israel, and they had a term for it called shalom, which we've often heard the word shalom meaning peace, but shalom actually means wholeness and completeness. It is this optimal state of health and connection with self. So, what wholeness is it is a robust relationship with myself, a relationship with others, and a relationship to my craft, my calling, and my purpose. And the reason why that first one, that relationship with self, is so important is because leaders have become all things for all people and they don't know who they are. They don't know where they're headed. They don't know what they feel. They have to rebuild and heal that relationship actually with themselves to show up as their authentic self. And when they can do that, then they can go on to the second stage, which is connection with others. Because if they don't have a deep and meaningful connection with others, guess what? We're relational beings. So we're going to connect in some way to something out there in the world. We're going to connect with alcohol. We're going to connect with success. We're going to connect with, performance as a way to make us feel safe and secure. We're going to bond and blend our relationship with something on the outside if we don't know how to have it authentically with friends and our spouses. And then the last one is connection to our craft, calling, and purpose. And that's where I talked about earlier is to heal your pain bleeds into defining your passion, and that passion becomes your purpose. Like, why are you actually here and why does it matter? What gifts do you have? And what is your calling in this world of your unique gifts in the world to create a positive impact in the lives of others? So, connection with self, connection with others, connection with my purpose. That is what we mean by this term wholeness. And I honestly think that is what so many leaders are craving and looking for, but they are seeking for and reaching for in so many wrong places. And that is why they're left high and dry. That is why they come to me feeling empty, feeling flat, feeling disconnected, feeling disappointed, is because the thing that they're looking for in this idea of wholeness, you can't buy it, you can't work for it, you can't earn it. You have to go through it with vulnerability and giving up control and submitting to this kind of vulnerability inside yourself. So it's a lot harder of a journey, but I think it's what all leaders are looking for: connection.
Do you find a lot of fear though with people that you're working with? Because I'm thinking of a few examples where this could be Steven Tyler and Aerosmith. I think very famously were partiers in the '70s, and they got kind of sober in the '80s. Maybe who knows?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
But
yeah.
but you hear that with rock stars. There's a lot of fear. Okay, well, if you give up this drug, this is a
Yeah,
huge part
yeah,
of my creativity. Michael Crichton, amazing author, in his book Travels, he talks about he got very into
Absolutely.
some other stuff, and he had an entity that he thought was attached to him. And before he released this entity, it was a very negative force in his life. But he's like, maybe this thing is what has made me such a great writer. And if I release this, am I going to lose that creativity that I've had? And so whether it's drugs, whether you're on the astral plane, as Michael Crichton would say, and it's an entity or something
Yeah.
else, those negative forces that are within us, so those destructive
Yeah.
habits, there can be a tendency to think, okay, well, this is what's giving me the horsepower, the juice to do what I'm doing. And so I think there's
Yeah.
probably a great fear giving that up. Is that, would you see
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, you're spot on. I think it is a juice that feeds that performance. You look at professional athletes, there's one word that a lot of them fear, and it's the word contentment. They hate
Right.
that word because to be content means that they stop performing. We
Right.
have to kind of rework that a little bit in their head. But as a leader who's using something as a substance or this other unhealthy coping behavior or no boundaries as a way to reach success, it's only helping a part of that person, the high performer, the achiever, the performer. There's a whole nother part to our life of this other part of us. So really it's a breakdown on being able to talk to those leaders and say, you're right. Like what you're doing, the unhealthy patterns and behaviors you have, guess what? They're going to make you really successful in one area of life, in one area of life. But why don't we broaden that to be successful in all of life, in the whole person? Because guess what? At the end of your deathbed, there's a lot of research on this. You probably know this, Brent. Like, what do people want at the end of their deathbed? They wanted deeper and more meaningful connections with people that mattered most in their life. That's what they needed. And guess what? Those coping mechanisms, those things that are so good to help us perform, guess what those do to our most intimate relationships? They shatter and they sliver the health within those. Okay. You look at anyone, the people you described of like this creativity that comes from these substances and they can just write, and they can just do, and they can just be. Imagine being married to those people. Imagine being a child of those adults and
Well, you see the
how
results.
chaotic. You see the results, right? I see the results. I see Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3 in family businesses. You see the impact of that. So if that is your primary goal as a leader, is to have your worth and identity defined by your performance, fine, go ahead and do that. I'm just going to tell you, I've seen the ripple impact on that, on your kids, on your marriages, on your friends. You will lose everything that is most important to you on your pursuit of your performance being your identity. And the reason why they can't let that go is because their entire identity is based in their performance. Your performance as a leader and your worth and value as a person need to be in two different boxes. How you perform and the ways in which you perform need to be its own thing, but who you are as a person needs to have value, worth, and identity outside of your work. If it does not, you will fear giving up anything that enhances your performance. And I'll say this because I've been doing this work for 15 years now, Brent, with leaders. It's kind of a delusional thought that somehow we can't perform at levels if we get emotionally healthy and whole. I see that these emotionally healthy leaders, they work just as hard, but from a central core of purpose and play and passion and peace. The whole, think about how much energy you have to use emotionally to hide, to perform, to put on. All that emotional energy, if you could free that up and you could come to work and perform from a place of joy and creativity and passion and play and freedom, you could let it flow. Imagine how much those emotional reserves you'd have left to give to your family and your friends. Life is not about performance and succeeding. And for those leaders who think it is, study some research on people on their deathbed, because guess what? You can't buy back the marriage that you broke. You can't you can't give your kids enough money or things to make them want to actually be around you as a parent. Okay. So don't forget about what matters most and don't lose the things that money cannot buy back: your health, your relationships, your relationship with yourself and your relationship with others, and your sense of purpose and mental health. You can't buy those things back. So don't lose those so easily just because you want performance as this ultimate goal. You got to broaden your perspective on life and see what's actually most valuable and important in life. So I agree with you. People don't want to let it go, but it's really because their identity is based in their performance and they need a broader view of what success looks like.
Let me ask you a flip side of that question. So obviously I talked about some of the potential benefits that could come from whatever that negative force is that's driving you. But everyone, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong with this, but I have a theory that everyone has a self-destruct gene in them. Human beings have a
Yeah.
self-destruct gene. And if you're
Yeah.
not aware of it, it's going to come up when you don't expect it. And I think that's part of the reason why people hit a certain level of success in a relationship with a business, and then they will start to inadvertently sabotage it. So that might have gotten them to this level, but then it's going to keep them banged down to whatever their sense of self-worth is. Do you see that? And do you see that maybe by confronting some of these shadows,
Yeah.
that people are able to break beyond that?
Absolutely. Every leader in your personality as a leader, you, Brent, me, everyone who's listening, you have natural personality gifts that are your strengths. Those strengths have the potential to bend towards a superpower or bend towards a shadow. So, me, I'm very directive. I'm pretty type A. I'm pretty driven. Guess what? When I channel that in a really healthy way, I can achieve a lot. I can get a lot done, and I can perform at really high levels. But if under stress and under tension, and I start to lose my sense of self worth and identity, if that bends towards a shadow, I become hyper controlling. I become a bulldozer. I don't ask people how they feel. I don't ask my wife how she feels. I just make things happen. So it has shadows to it. And I think for leaders, it's important to recognize that every strength that you have, it has a superpower, but it also has a shadow. And you have to know how to put gasoline on it to create the superpower, and you got to know how to refine the edges to clean up the shadows. And the thing that I'll say on this of what I've realized about these parts that sabotage, Brent, is you have to know kind of what you're comfortable with in life. And what I mean by that is some leaders, they only want to feel the positive emotions like joy and happiness and excitement and thrill and the dopamine hit. And they fear feeling things like sadness and loss and pain and slowing down because they're afraid they're going to get stuck there and then they won't be able to perform. So they stay up in this high level zone of happiness and joy and optimism because they're afraid to feel sad because they're afraid they're going to get stuck there. Other people actually love staying in this zone of somberness, on reflection, of depth. And they actually fear being able to hope, power, passion, pleasure, excitement, optimism. That's actually the scary zone because they've had experiences of when they go up, crap hits the fan, and then they fall even further than they started with. So some people like to stay here, some people like to stay here, and they fear the opposite spectrum. And we have these saboteurs in our head that go, we don't want to go there because if we go there, you're going to get stuck there. So don't feel the low, stay in the optimism. Or what's the point of hoping? You know it's not going to work out anyway. So just set really low goals for life.
Mhm.
We have these ways of keeping us safe. And I think the most important thing to remember is not to be judgmental of ourselves when we see those parts, but to be curious and compassionate and really ask the question, what are you so afraid is going to happen if I go feel those hard feelings? What are you so afraid is going to happen if I start to dream big? And then you wait and you just listen, and that voice starts to talk of, well, what if people don't like what you put out there? What if you disappoint people? And then you have to almost speak back as a coach or as a father or as a mentor to that part and say, it's okay. Like, I don't need to be liked by everybody. I want to live with passion and joy. So let me kind of dream big. I'm going to be okay. We'll figure it out. I'm not afraid to disappoint people. You almost have to coach yourself through these saboteurs that are just trying to keep you safe. Um, but the goal of life is not to feel safe. The goal of life is to connect with self, connect with others, and feel passionate about our purpose. So everybody has them. We just have to coach them and we have to listen to them.
So Andy, how if people are listening to this and it's resonating, our conversation, Pursue Whole does a lot of things. You've got a coaching program, vision guides, you've got Forged program. I'm looking at your website right now. How do they find you, and what's the next best step to engage with you?
Yeah, probably about 90% of my clients come from referrals. So this is because my clients have had a positive experience. They share it with other people in their community, specifically in YPO. So 80% of my clients come from the YPO community. I love serving that community nationally. So if you're at a point as a leader, I would say, where you want to feel and dream about feeling more in life, or you have emotional struggles that you're facing, I would honestly just reach out and have a conversation with me. That way, I can be able to walk you through, okay, what's going on? What do you want out of life? What are your hangups? So you can reach out to me personally or talk to other people in your community and just say, hey, I'm thinking about, chatting with this guy, Andy. Do you know him? Have you heard of his stuff? More than likely someone in that community will probably have been my client. I just can't talk about my clients. They can talk about all they want. So just start to open up with other people in your life and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing some deeper journey. Who should I go see? Who should I work with? And I'd be happy to talk to any leader to that wants to kind of discover, what they need and where they need to go.
And if they want to find you online, the website is pursuewhole.com.
Yep, they can contact me there. I'm on LinkedIn, pretty active on LinkedIn. So you can just search Andy Maurer on LinkedIn. You can start a conversation that way. But yeah, I love being able to sit down with leaders and being able to just help them understand what's going on the inside. That's the biggest thing when I sit down with leaders is I say, what's going on? What do you need help with? And they're like, I don't know. That's part of the problem. Something feels off. I don't know how to identify what's actually going on. So for me to sit with someone and be able to draw out and say, well, here's what I see, here's what I notice, this is where I think it comes from. It adds immense clarity for them to go, oh, okay, this person actually understands better than I do, like what's going on. And I can put words to some of what they feel. And that can be really helpful for people who feel confused and lost about what they feel.
Well, I think to your point, I think having that safe space and having a trusted person you can do that with is important because anyone I think that is a high achiever has a certain degree of desire for control. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're diving into waters where you historically have not gone there, you're going to lose a little bit of control in order to get more control at the tail end of that. And
Yeah,
so I think I think it's amazing work that you're doing, and I really appreciate the time you spent with us today.
you're very welcome. Thank you so much.
I,
It's a good one
I'm
today,
of a,
Bill. That was good.
I'm a little bit older than Brent. So I'm sitting here watching and listening to this conversation, and it's blowing my mind because the kind of thing you're talking about in terms of developing as a leader and the kind of leaders that you are talking about nurturing and creating are radically, massively, stunningly, mind-blowingly different than someone of my generation and my age.
Mm.
And I was sitting here stumbling through a lot of this stuff, trying to listen to it, and then I thought, what is the reaction of? I just can't. I need to ask this question. What is the reaction to people who come to you and they're going, I feel like I need to, I feel like my leadership, I need to be coached. I need some help here.
Yeah.
And you start laying this stuff on them. I mean,
Mhm.
what
It's
granted, your
but
clients are probably a lot
you know what,
younger.
Bill? Well, no, I've worked with a lot of older clients
Yeah.
because they have to start thinking about legacy and they have to think about the ripple impact of their entire life. Listen, no leader wants to think about this stuff because it's painful and it's depressing to have to go back and realize, oh my gosh, I've lived 40 years disconnected from a part of myself. What the hell? Like that doesn't feel good. That's super depressing.
Yeah.
So no leader wants to face that. But you know what the reality is? They can continue on in the lifestyle that they have been going, and that's fine with me. But the things that they ultimately want, and all of them will agree to this. I want a deeper connection. I want to feel connected to myself, my true self. I want to feel connected to others. And I want to live with a sense of passion and purpose that what I'm doing has meaning. Listen, that's every single leader who comes in is searching for that. I just have to tell them and kind of break the bubble and go, everything that you want there, you will never achieve by this trajectory that you are on. I hate to break it to you. You have to learn how to start feeling and facing what's inside in order to access that. And honestly, sometimes they're like, I've lived too long to be able to change course. I'm just going to keep going. And it's like, okay, you do what you need to do. That's fair. But a lot of leaders really recognize, you know what? I want more out of life. I want to feel alive in my leadership. I want to feel connected. And they have that flexibility, that plasticity in their brain to go, how do we start this journey? And part of it is you just start by sharing your story. You start by, and it's always like session 4 or 5 that I get in with clients, and I do this empty chair work where I actually have them physically change chairs into these different parts. They're high performer and they're emotional, and those parts kind of talk to each other. And it's in that moment, there's always one moment in coaching, usually in the first 6 sessions, where a leader feels what I'm talking about and they go, oh, now I get it. There's that part that I've been running away from. Shit. And then things really start to change and they start to go, okay, I need to now deal with this part of me that I've just neglected forever. And then they're like, how do I do that? And that's really the relationship starts flowing. If they never reach that point, our coaching process is a bust. I mean, the whole thing, it's boring. It's not transformational. They're just getting tips and tactics. They're never really going to change as a person. But usually in the first 6 sessions, we have them face that part and they go, whoa, I actually feel that. Okay, I need to address that. So it takes a level of faith, but guess what? I'm a very boutique brand in what I'm doing. So I don't need everybody. I need the people who are ready to make that change. But my mission over the next 5 years is to educate the market around this idea of wholeness, because I think it's what they're ultimately looking for. They're just trying to resolve that in ways that are just not serving them well. So I'm trying to educate them on the problem, educate them on a new solution. And that just takes time to educate a market around a new idea.
That's great. You know, Brent, as you know, and you've had a couple of episodes dealing with the concept and the nature of leadership. This for me was one of the more fulfilling and more interesting ones. Thank you for, having this conversation. Yeah, this is great.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah. It's my passion. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I can tell. And it's great. And Brent, thank you for facilitating it. I appreciate it. For people who are listening to this conversation today and are thinking that based on what they've heard, maybe they want to have a conversation with you, Brent, about other matters because you're just an interesting guy. What is the best way for them to reach out and get a hold of you?
Our website is tws.finance. Very active on LinkedIn. As I say, during most of our podcast episodes, I get a lot of DMs on LinkedIn, actually. And it is me on the other side that's responding to those. Or you can call here at the office at 602-255-0555, and somebody will know how to find me.
That's great. The other thing you can do if you're listening to this podcast and you're not a subscriber is become a subscriber. And that part's the easiest thing. All you have to do is hit follow.
Yeah, and if you like it, give us 5 stars. That helps too.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that as a matter of fact. If you like it, tell people about it. Give it 5 stars. Give it a good rating, because word of mouth promotion makes a big difference. It's a lot easier to trust somebody than some weird bot that you don't have any relationship with. So we'd appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Bill Tucker. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. We do appreciate it on behalf of Brent and everybody at TWS. Thanks for spending the time, and shalom.
There it is.